What's up, Saints Nation? Welcome into preseason game number 1 edition of Inside Black and Gold. Steve Geller along with Jeff Nowak. And, man, we got a game on Saturday night in Arizona. Jeff, I know you are on a tight schedule right now as you get ready for a flight out to AZ.
Not that tight. Not that tight. I don't think we fly out until like about 5 Pacific. So I got time. But that's the reason we're doing, hashtag lunch pod. Because this is the best time to do it. It's like 8:45 for me right now. So we tried to considering doing it last night. It was kind of the decision between, hey, a late night, hot cocoa pod versus lunch pod. So we went with lunch pod, but it did give me an opportunity to mess around. So if anyone is wondering why my camera looks better these days, it's because recently I figured out that I could use my iPhone as the camera, which is like, I couldn't buy I would never buy a camera as fancy as the one on my phone. But as Steve figured out, or as Steve saw when we were messing around before, I just figured out that I can do stuff like this. I can have like lightning and thunderclouds. So next time Steve makes like a gloomy take, I'm just going to put thunder behind me. And then when he says something like, oh, touchdown, fireworks.
Yeah, we're like a professional studio in here now.
I'm like flashing. No, professionals don't do stuff like this. I'm like flashing back to when I was going into college and I got photo booth on my MacBook for the first time. Right. Oh man. Anyway, but that's not what we're here to talk about. But I do have a good. Have been having a good time with that. But man, 13 practices in. I am freaking tired of watching practice. Let's put it that way. So I'm, you might say, preseason games don't matter. I'm fired up to like watch actual like games with refs and scoring, right? Like I'm fired up about it. So I'm looking forward to being out in Arizona and watching all these backups kind of run around and trip over themselves.
In general, though, I think even going into this year, there is a little bit more excitement than typical just because you have this QB2 competition going on. And it's like, what's going to happen?
Oh, no question. And that's the real sales pitch, of why you should care about these preseason games. Jake Haener, Spencer Rattler, it's very much a competition, and I think it's wide open at this point. And we're going to get into that. This first segment, I want to do kind of a rundown, talk about the latest updates, anything that's come out the last few days of practice since the last time we did an episode. There's been a few things. So we're getting to all of that. We'll talk about Justin Simmons, will the starters play, stuff like that. Segment 2, Bobby Hebert and Mike Detillier got to sit down with Drew Brees at his good old Pickle Fest, Nola Pickle Fest, which I appreciate that he's doing that because it means every year we get to sit down and have the state of the Saints with Drew Brees. It's like the State of the Union, except it's Drew Brees telling us it's going to be okay. So we'll get into that. He talked about the offense. He talked a lot about Taysom Hill and how much usage he thinks he should get, which is more than I think some people probably would agree with. But we'll get into that. And final segment, we will talk kind of players, things to watch in the preseason game, right? So it's going to be tough because we don't know exactly who's going to be out there, but we will go from there. But yeah, so how have you been following these injuries, Steve? What? Because it's like every day, it's like, man, this list gets longer and longer and longer.
Yeah, and I thought it was kind of amusing in yesterday's, I'll say Thursday's post-practice interview with Dennis Allen, the fact that he was even asked, it's like, how ideal is it to go into this preseason game with just 6 wide receivers? And he's like, well, it's not ideal, but we're going to have to work through it.
You say 6? I don't even know if it's 6 because I don't know if you play Chris Olave, right?
Right.
So you might be talking 5, which I'm sure that's perfectly fine with the wide receivers out there because and we're going to talk about this. There's some guys who we're going to try to make an impression, but it does make things a little complicated in that, okay, do we have enough guys to you're going to have guys come out of the game in the first quarter, and in most cases, you'd be like, okay, you can take your pads off. You can chill. You can't, because what if a guy gets hurt in the third quarter and suddenly you only have 4 wide receivers left? They got to go back in the game. And there also are, I wouldn't say there's guys other than Olave who you would say oh yeah, you're good. 1 drive and you're done. So we'll see it. But yeah, the most recent injury is Mason Tipton, and that's frustrating for this game. Right. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. And it's because these are we're talking about Mason Tipton. He's had a really strong start to camp, but in my last roster projection, I left him off it because I think I need to see him prove something in a game, right? Last year, I think we were all really low on A.T. Perry, or lower than we hoped we would be. And then he went out in the preseason games and he looked good. And that goes a long way because you can look good in practice, but until you show it in a game setting, it's all kind of make believe, right? It's all idealistic. It's not like, okay, the lights came on and you wilted. Where'd you go?
And even preseason's make believe, but like you said, at least it's still live action.
Yeah, but it's tape. It's real tape,
right?
You put out there, and you can point to, and it's confidence building for a lot of these guys, right? Now, it doesn't mean everything, but it is important, and so we're going to talk about that. The injuries, obviously, Mason Tipton. We talked about that hamstring. He's going to have to figure that out. But there was 16 players. 16 players did not practice on Thursday. Now, last practice for a preseason game. You're not rushing anybody back, but here's that list. So Ugo Amadi dealing with a groin issue. Equinemius St. Brown dealing with a hamstring. Stanley Morgan, I believe it was a hip. I have to double check. Wide receiver Bub Means, shin injury. Linebacker Pete Werner, who just got extended, 3-year extension, shoulder injury. Wide receiver Rashid Shaheed, he's been out for a little while, dealing with a hamstring injury. Dennis Allen, when he went out, said it was precautionary. We still haven't seen him. Well, I will take that back. He was out there with the team yesterday. A lot of these guys are out there watching, so we didn't see him, but he's not practicing. I think he's going to be fine. A lot of these guys are just precautionary, but cornerback Marshawn Lattimore been out for a while, hip flexor issue. Like, that's one that I'm a little concerned about. Running back Kendre Miller has been out since like the first 5 minutes of training camp with a hamstring injury. Cornerback Paulson Adebo dealing with a groin injury. He tried to play through it the other day, did not work out, so he's missed the last 2 days of practice. Tyrann Mathieu was a rest day, so we can mark that one off. Isaiah Stallbird kind of went down with a lower leg injury, stayed in practice on Wednesday, but he was not out there on Thursday. Linebacker Demario Davis, we have seen out there several times not practicing, dealing with a hamstring injury of its own, doesn't sound super significant. Guard Nick Saldiveri, calf injury, have not seen him for about a week plus. Shane Lemieux has been in and out with an ankle injury. He was out. He did not practice on Thursday. Trajan Jeffcoat has been out since the first days of practice. He dislocated his elbow. It's going to take him a little while to come back. And then obviously Tipton. So that's 16 guys. So we're going to talk about, like, what do you expect to see in the preseason? I don't know, because I don't know who's going to play. It's tough.
Yeah, that's why we hear even yesterday with Derek Carr saying, "Oh yeah, I want some snaps. I want to play." It's like, but do the Saints want you to play right now?
Yeah, and let's hear that clip because it is kind of telling of like where his mindset is at in terms of this offense.
You want to play Saturday night?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would like to. I think just getting out there and just hearing Clint's voice in the helmet, calling plays, getting the substitutions in and out. I think that'd just be good for our, us as an offense. We're not going to, how the preseason goes. It's very basic stuff. Very, very easy, simple. You don't want to show anything, all that kind of stuff. But even with that said, like, you're not game planning the team. I haven't seen any film, so you need to go out there and play. But I think just the operation and just getting in and out of the huddle with each other, getting used to it, getting back in that swing, I think hopefully you knock some of that game day kind of rust off before you really get to the regular season.
We've talked about your philosophy on that in the past, and you were comfortable with not doing a lot of it. And then last year, you had that great drive.
Yeah.
But I mean, did you walk away from last summer, September, thinking maybe more would have helped or anything like that?
I think every year is different. I really do believe that. I think last year it was nice to get out there and see the stadium for the first, be in front of the fans like that, all that kind of stuff. And I think you've already done that kind of stuff. I think now it's just more like the operational stuff. It is a new offense. Like, I guess coming from my past, with Gruden, I mean, still to this day, he could tell me a play and I can go out there and run it. We were just on such a same page that part of it we didn't need to do. And really in the preseason, the way we played, we weren't even doing what we were going to do in the regular season anyway. So I think it's just different, But again, this year is new, and it's new for everybody. It's not just new for me. It's new for everybody. So I think, especially when it's new for everybody, hopefully we can get out there and just get a couple, whatever that looks like. I don't know what DA is thinking, whether we are or not this game or whatever, but, at some point you just hope to maybe go get a.
Yeah, and so that's Derek Carr talking about he wants to play in the preseason game. And we talked to DA on Thursday. He would not say high or low whether the Saints would have their starters out there. I did talk to Deuce McAllister about this just because it is kind of a confusing thing. He's like, well, why haven't they made that decision yet? He said that typically for a game on Saturday, you would make those decisions on Thursday, right? You would have those meetings on Thursday. You would decide, hey, this guy's going to play, this guy's going to sit. So I think that's where it is. And DA doesn't want players to find out I'm playing in the preseason through the media, right? And so I think that's really all it is. But when you hear Derek saying, I want to play, and I want to get up to speed with this offense. And in terms of just kind of the communication, right? That's one of the biggest changes is getting the plays in and out, the verbiage, stuff like that, getting in and out of the huddle. I think it's highly likely that we see Derek Carr out there for at least this series. And the real question is, are you ready to play the first team offensive line? Because that's always the question for me when you talk about the starting quarterback in the preseason. I'm not throwing him out there behind backups. I'm throwing him out there if I have all 5 starters. And so if you're willing to play all 5 starting offensive linemen, which I think you should be, because they need to get work together too, I expect to see Derek. So I would expect to see the offensive starters for at least this series.
Yeah, for me, it's like at least one of these preseason games, whether it's this one against San Fran or against the Titans, you need some kind of live action, especially with this new offense being installed. And, you want to get I don't know. For this first game, it's hard to say, oh, you want the guys to get into a rhythm. And then obviously there's 2 more games if Derek Carr doesn't see action. And then you have that little mini bye before week 1. So I don't know if it's really getting into a rhythm or just getting everybody on that same page and comfortable, confident that they know what's going on in this Kubiak scheme and are comfortable in it, I guess.
Yeah, I don't see it as being a rhythm thing because we saw last year, and honestly, the last 2 years, right? The offense has looked great in that opening drive and then really kind of bogged down early in the year. Like they picked it up late in the year, but it wasn't like, oh yeah, you just saw that preseason, they were ready to go. Like there was clearly things they had to figure out. I think it's more in this case, just making sure that everyone is comfortable. Right. And you can go from there. But we'll see. I don't expect to see more than a series at best. Maybe we see more action this preseason, but remember they have the joint practices on Thursday and Friday against the 49ers. So that's going to be a lot of important action. So I would be surprised if we see him in game 2. We'll have to find out. Either way, we're going to go from there. But, you mentioned the offensive line. So let's dive right into that. And the question becomes, okay, how concerned should you be about the offensive line? It's funny because fans aren't out here. And so a lot of people, and you can't record the full team drills. So,
right.
I know a lot of people are trying to make determinations off of write-ups and off of vibes and off of tweets. Right. And I get it. It's the only thing you have really. And so what ends up happening is there have been rough days for the offensive line. Like the first day of third down drill. That was awful. They were in the backfield all day, but then you look at, there was no Eric McCoy. You were rotating the left guards and the defense knew it could pin its ear back and go get the quarterback because it's third down, right? Any third and longer than 5, it's a pass rush down. Yesterday, really rough day for Trevor Penning in particular. He got in a fight with Willie Gay. The last 3 reps of the day, he got lined up against Chase Young. It was a 2-minute set and he just got destroyed, I think it was kind of indicative of one of my bigger concerns with Trevor and why I brought up his mindset a lot going into camp is it seems like way too often for him in particular, he gets in his head, he'll lose a rep and then that lost rep leads to 2 more lost reps because he already got beat that time before he even got back again. Right. And that's what you saw in those last 3 reps. Like it seemed like he completely reverted to, when he gets in trouble, he's trying to catch the pass rusher. And what that means is you're not being aggressive with your hands. You got to shoot your hands. You're a big, strong guy. You got to redirect them, and when Trevor gets in trouble, particularly with a guy like Chase Young, he's trying to let the kind of rusher come to him. Right. And you got to do that to an extent. You got to work angles, but you also have to kind of manhandle the guy. Like if Trevor's going to be successful as a pass protector, he's going to have to use his hands and kind of control the action. And that's what he didn't do there. And it's something that we've seen kind of in fits and starts throughout camp is like, he's getting better, but you still see these kind of glaring areas of like, man, you got to stop doing that. And here's the thing though, like when I say all this, it's to point out, you're not going to hear about Trevor Penning when he's not doing badly. Right. Like, and that's the issue. That's why in my notes on Wednesday, I made sure to point out like, hey, this was one of Trevor's best days. I actually thought that going into Thursday's practice, he had put together, 3-4 really solid days of practice. And you go back and like, think about it. Why do you think you haven't been hearing about him? Right? Why do you think like it hasn't been this major discussion? We weren't really talking about Trevor until he had a really rough finish to Thursday. It's because he'd been playing fine. Not great, but developing and looking like a serviceable tackle. And that's the biggest difference to me is you look at where this offensive line has struggled, and it's been in obvious passing situations. And obviously, like, you can't avoid those entirely. But I do think when you look at how can this offense be successful, how can this offense protect Derek Carr and protect its offensive line, you have to be aware that, hey, if we're constantly in third and long situations where we're passing and they know it and they can pin their ears back and they can come after Trevor Penning, you're going to be in trouble, and that's just the reality of it. But I think if you can run some offense, if you can establish the run, if you can get in third and manageable situations where the defense has to be honest and you can run some play action that the defense buys, we've seen this offense have success. We've seen this offensive line have success. So, I think that there's reason to be concerned about the offensive line. And it's the same reason we went into this offseason with the offensive line being at the top of the list of like, man, this could be a problem. But I don't think it's more concerning now than it was going in. I just really need to see Trevor kind of cut down on those, okay, this series is over because I got beat once. Like, you can get beat once and recover. We saw that from Spencer and the second team offensive line yesterday. Like, Landon Young had a holding penalty. They come back and they get the penalty yardage back and they get in the end zone. Like, it's not the end of the world, but you got to be able to recover from that. And to me, that's the bigger concern. Like, I don't have a question whether Trevor can do it. He physically can. Like, we've seen it happen. It's the mental side of the equation. Can he do it consistently? And can you avoid those long stretches where it seems like you've already defeated yourself mentally before the ball was even snapped? And that's why that stretch at the end of the practice was concerning. But that's not the only thing that's happened in camp, right? Like, you have to weigh the good with the bad. And I think over the last week plus, we've seen some good from Trevor. But when you're looking at an offensive line and all you're seeing is, oh yeah, that was a solid rep. He didn't get beat. He held up fine. He maybe got beat on the inside move, but he recovered. Like, that's not going to make headlines. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at with it. What do you think? How have you been kind of seeing this?
I was going to say, to your point you mentioned with Penning, if you're not hearing his name, it means he's doing all right. I feel like there's been really very little coming out about first-round pick Taliesin Fuaga from this camp. So I'm like, I guess he's doing all right then.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like when you're not hearing about offensive linemen, it means they're doing okay. Yeah. But at the same time, when you do hear about them, it's concerning and you get all worked up about it. And I get it. But you kind of have to see. And we'll see if he plays in this game. We'll see how much he plays in this game. I do want to draw attention to one more clip from Derek Carr here because he's talking about the offensive line and how he's kind of seen it.
I would say this, like, I've been so impressed with how fast it's a different system, right? Especially protection-wise, there's different things, different calls. I've been so impressed with how fast they picked it up. I've been really impressed with the execution of it. We've had a few things. There was it wasn't the 2-minute drive we wanted today. They finally got us. I'll say that. Cam's always talking crap about these competitive drills. They finally stopped us. I think we're up 7-1. I don't know if that's the right count, but I'll just stick with it. But they got us today. But what you're saying is, like, you see guys really trying to do things the way they're taught, because if everyone does it the way they're taught, it usually ends up right. And so, again, these coaches have such a system that it takes everyone being on the same page. And so the more reps we can get being on the same page and doing it, live bullets, all that, I think it'd be just a good thing.
Yeah, and so I saw a couple people look at that clip and say, like, wow, he must be lying. There's I keep seeing these things about the offensive line being terrible. And I understand why you'd say that, because there was one day where I would say the defense got 14 sacks, right? Plus however many, right? Like, but what you need to understand is he's talking about the competitive drills. And by that, he means like 2-minute situations, like when they actually put a score and time up on the clock. Yeah. And the offense is trying to do something, whether it's an end of game scenario where they need a field goal, or an end of half scenario where you're just trying to put up points, whether it's a touchdown or a field goal, or an end of game scenario where you need a touchdown, right? So when he's saying they're 7-1, it's a little over an exaggeration.
I was going to say, what's his scorecard? Is that correct or not?
Well, here's the thing. This is the first time that I would say that the defense prevented the offense from doing what it was trying to do, right? And so that's kind of where you land, right? There was a scenario where it was an end of game scenario and they needed to drive in the field goal range. Offense did that, right? There was a scenario where an end and a half scenario where you gave them 2 minutes and they went down the field. They started the 30. They scored a touchdown. The second team offense scored a touchdown. There was one that was led by Spencer with the second team. The first day of 2-minute reps where they failed to get downfield, and I think the clock ran out on them because it was 4th and something. They didn't have time to spike it. That wasn't a good one, but that was the second team, right? So that was the first time that I have seen the first team offense fail to achieve their goal, right? Like, it's not that they got into the end zone every time, but when they needed a field goal, they got a field goal. When they needed a touchdown, they got a touchdown. Yesterday, they did not. But I will say, and my camera's going a little wonky here. Yeah, I will say that it's not really 4-1 because they got stopped twice yesterday. So I would say 4-2 in terms of the first team offense. Now, if you're adding the second and third team offense, I would say more like 8-3. But he's right. The in those situational reps, the offense has gotten it done, and I think that's important because it's not, when you're installing the offense, you're not necessarily making adjustments to say, okay, well, we want to help Trevor. We want to chip with a tight end. We're going to do some things that we might not have in the normal scheme to make sure that we don't get that extra pressure off the right side. And so it becomes a little easier for Trevor. You're not doing that in drills because you're just trying to install and see what he can do. You're learning. But they have done well in those 2-minute situations. So it's not necessarily him just kind of, blowing smoke. That said, they haven't been as perfect as he would lay it out. And I mean, well, people want to get gripe at Derek Carr for everything. What do you want him to say? I've been terrible. Like I'm running for my life. No, he's not. Even if that was true, he wasn't going to say that. So I don't know. I think he's recalling it how he remembers it. But I will say that he's not lying when he says that the offense has been really solid in those situational sets because they have.
Yeah, obviously, hearing that yesterday, I played the clip too on Sports Talk, and it was kind of like a little taken back. I was like, well, that sounds pretty good for the offense. And then the Cajun Cannon, Bobby Hebert, even chimed in going, yeah, but that's not good for the defense. It should be more balanced, like, 4-3 or something like that, not 7-1.
Yeah, I think it is a little closer than he's making it out to be, right? Like, at the end of the day, there's a reason the quarterbacks buy their offensive linemen like fancy gifts for Christmas, right? You're not, right. You whether they're playing well or not, you want them to be playing for you. So yeah, you should, you don't want to be getting in fights with your center, right? Like you want things to go well. One last note before we move on to the second segment here, and I just want to mention Justin Simmons, right? He came in for a visit on Wednesday. It reportedly went well. He left on Thursday morning. They're doing some kind of fact finding to figure out if that's going to work out. Here's the clip from DA talking about the visit with Justin Simmons.
Look, I thought it was a good visit, and so I can't tell you exactly where that stands right now. I think this is one of those deals where we have a chance to sit down and visit with him in a number of different fronts. Myself, Mickey, coaching staff, even some of the players get a chance to sit down with him get a feel for us get a feel for him, and then we evaluate how that went. We evaluate it from our standpoint. I think he's going through an evaluation process on from his standpoint of where he feels like that is. I'm sure there'll be some communication, from our people to his people, and we'll see. Look, I thought it was.
I always turn off loop, but it turned back on. I don't understand. Anyway, that's why it started playing again there. But no, so yeah, that's basically what DA is saying there. And it's kind of a situation where I think Justin is going to weigh his options and see how it goes. My understanding and kind of how it felt from the beginning, and we talked about this on Sports Talk the other day, I think the Saints want to get Justin in on a 1-year deal. And, maybe you add some void years to the back end and make it a little easier on the cap. But I don't think they want to commit multiple years to Justin Simmons. And I think from a 30-year-old safety's perspective, yeah, you do want a little bit more security, and I think that's kind of where you land. And so I think it's a scenario where they're like, hey, if you can go out and find yourself a multi-year deal, go do it. And if you do, hey, maybe we can match it or maybe we can do a little better. But I don't think the Saints are going to kind of bid against themselves when I don't think that Justin has a ton of options.
That's what's wild to me. It's like, why is there no market for Simmons?
I don't know if there's no market. I just think there's no market at the value that he's looking for. It's the same thing that happened with Jarvis Landry, right? Like we saw that happen late in the, the 2022 offseason, right? Heading into the 2022 season, he went into that offseason looking for a big contract. Like we're talking big numbers, and that just wasn't there. And then the Saints kind of just held firm and said, hey, we want you, but this is what we're willing to pay. And if this is where you want to be, come and get it. And he did. Obviously the scenario didn't necessarily work out the way the Saints hoped, but I think their methodology for how they got there was smart. And I think you saw the same thing with Tyrann Mathieu when they signed Tyrann Mathieu. I think he was initially looking for a much bigger deal than he got, and the Saints kind of came in late and gave him the deal that made sense. And so I think that's where you are with Justin Simmons too. You're not going to go overboard because safety just isn't a position, first of all, that you should feel super concerned about. Like Justin Simmons is an upgrade, but this is not like a bottom of the barrel position where it's like, yeah, we got to find something. This would be a great addition. It's not a gotta have it addition. It's not a must. It's a want at best. And so that's kind of where you are. And we'll see. I don't think there's any rush to get this done with Justin. I don't think you're going to play him in the preseason. I don't think you're concerned about how he's going to mesh with Tyrann Mathieu. He's a 30-year-old safety. And here's the thing. Joe Woods has coached him before. Marcus Robertson has coached him before. So you have an idea of what you're getting. That's what I asked DA about. It's like, yeah, it makes it a lot easier if you're talking about adding a safety this late in the game, adding a starter this late in the game, a guy who's going to displace guys who have been here. You need to know that's going to be a positive addition for the locker room. You need to know that you're not just pouring bleach into your chemistry set, right? Like, because that can happen. Like there are variables. These guys all have personalities, and these guys all mix a certain way. And you saw last year how quickly situations can kind of fall apart if not everyone is pulling the rope in the same direction. And I know I'm mixing metaphors here with chemistry and like tug of war, but you get the idea. Like understanding who that guy is going to help. And I think that's part of the reason that he's going to have a hard time finding a bigger deal than what the Saints are going to offer him, finding a longer term deal, because not everyone has that kind of knowledge about, okay, well, we've coached him before. We understand what kind of guy he is. So that's going to help. And I think it's going to get done personally. I think it's just going to be a question of how long Justin wants to kind of run the circles to see what he can get.
Yeah, I heard the rumors on social media. Obviously, the Pete Werner deal was to help free up more cap space for the Simmons deal.
No,
huh?
I mean, they didn't need to do that. You're talking about $1 million. Like you're not talking. He was only going to count 1.4 million against the cap this year. Anyway, you had 14 million in cap space, so it wasn't like they needed to do that. Now, if you're looking at it and saying, well, we need to do that and find some extra money for Alvin.
In the banana stand, right?
Yeah, and who knows what else. I don't think that those two things are connected. I think it's more indicative of, hey, we asked Pete to do something. We asked Pete to come out here in a competition and show us that you mean business, right? And he did. And he's looked incredible for the first couple weeks of camp. Now he's dealing with an injury right now, but I do think it also kind of tells you if there was any real concern about the shoulder injury, you probably would have waited this out. He's just it's just a maintenance thing. And I think he showed what they needed him to show. And you reward him for that. Now the question becomes, hey, do you want to extend Paulson? Adebo's going into contract year 2, same draft class, right? I would have going into this camp said it was more likely that Adebo got that extension than Pete. But I think Pete's had a better camp. And I think Adebo, I wouldn't say that this has been his strongest camp. So I think that's where you go. But yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily a money thing this year. It'll be a money thing next year because now you have him locked in and you don't have to worry about, who's our starting linebacker.
I love the fact too, on a note with the Simmons deal, it seems like Tyrann Mathieu is like the closer to come in and try and, get these players to come to New Orleans. I think he was part of the Chase Young dinner in NOLA. And I know it was reported that he was part of the faction that was, wined and dined Justin Simmons and that they got along great.
No question. No, Tyrann is a major selling point for this team. Like people want to play with Tyrann. People know who Tyrann is. Tyrann is a superstar in this league. Now, obviously, he's on the backside of his career, but like there's a reason that they keep putting Tyrann front and center. Not only is he kind of this very well appreciated figure in the NFL, he's won a Super Bowl, right? Like he's been part of these really great defenses. He's been in the league forever. He's also like 100% 10 toes down bought into this system and this coaching staff.
Yes.
And that's important. Like you could say he shouldn't be. You can say, I hate Dennis Allen. I don't want him to be around. But the fact of the matter is you have this superstar defensive player who was out there telling you, no, this is the guy. Same thing with DeMario Davis. Like,
Exactly
if you
right.
don't think that's significant for this team in terms of getting where they're trying to get, and you got your head in the sand. Because these are two superstar players. These are the leaders of your team telling you, like, no, we got the pieces. We just need to put it together. And like, yeah, maybe they're crazy. Maybe they're, seeing what they want to see. But in terms of sales pitch for free agents coming in, that is massive. So we'll see. But Julius Rickles says, quote, DA is cool now, Tyron. So yeah, I agree with that. But all right, let's wrap up that segment. It was a long one. So, and like I said, I gotta get some stuff done today. I got to go buy a bag. So I forgot to bring a secondary bag for my trip within a trip. So I'm going to have to get done with this pretty soon. But let's hit a break. We're going to come back. We're going to hear from the guy, Drew Brees, chatting with Mike Detillier and Bobby Hebert. Who
You don't want to do the old throw everything in a trash bag?
I could do that. But you'll see me out on the sideline with like a massively wrinkled shirt, and maybe I'll just wear like flip flops. Anyway, let's hit the break. We're gonna come back and hear from the GOAT himself, Drew Brees. Who dat is Inside Black and Gold. Subscribe. We'll be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Balloons.
Happy birthday.
Sorry, I can't help myself.
It's like you're a child with a new toy.
I am a child with a new toy. That's exactly what I am. Fireworks. Anyway, so yeah, back here coming at you live. I'm in Irvine. Steve is in Louisiana. A couple comments here saying like they can tell the difference between myself, who has been hanging out in this nice Southern California weather, and you have been getting beaten down by the Louisiana humidity and boil water advisories and all the terribleness.
I don't know. I've been hanging out in air conditioning, so this is just me looking beaten down and withered like usual.
Well, that's what I told people. It's like, it's funny because I've been out in the sun so much more here that I'm like starting to get concerned about it. Like I've been putting on sunscreen just when I'm like going to do anything, because it's such a big difference of like when you're in Louisiana, it's like I end up getting pale in the summer because it's like you avoid the sun at all costs. Like
right.
You don't go outside in the middle of August. You find every excuse to stay inside. Whereas here, I'm like, yeah, sure. It feels like a waste of time to not go hang out directly under the UV rays. Anyway, it's definitely a different experience.
Definitely, just walking around like you mentioned, there's no point in it for Louisiana because you're just getting beaten down right now. So definitely envy the cooler air out west for you.
It's brutal, and coming back to it at the end of this month is going to be terrible. I don't know how I'm going to deal with it, but. Speaking of someone who's been hanging out in air conditioning down in New Orleans, we got Drew Brees, second annual NOLA Pickle Fest. I don't know if he's going to rematch with John McEnroe, but I think he wants
McEnroe this year, but he does. Drew wants the rematch.
No Johnny Mac. But here's a couple clips. We're going to play a couple clips from the conversation with Drew Brees and Bobby Hebert and Mike Detillier. First one's going to be him kind of talking about the offense. We know he's a big fan of Derek Carr. He's told us before, but he also has some comments in there. So let's hear it.
Tell me where you think the Saints are at.
I mean, look, our division's wide open, right?
Yeah.
But our division's been wide open for the last 2 or 3 years,
yeah.
Right? I think what I haven't seen is just consistency. I'd say last year, look, we finished the year playing great, but unfortunately we were in too big of a hole that we weren't able to pull out of it. I think you want to feel like, number one, each and every week you're getting a little bit better, or you're playing, you kind of know what your bread and butter is. Like, what your identity is. You know what you're kind of leaning on, right? And I'd say over the last couple of years, we've had certainly a top 10, if not a top 5 defense.
Yeah.
As long as we can stay healthy, right?
Yeah.
Up front, look, I love our offensive line, but we got to stay healthy, right?
Wait, you say you love our offensive line, Drew? Come on, that's you sugar.
I played with all these guys. Look,
No,
those guys were young guys when I was.
You didn't
when
play
I
with
was
Trevor Penning.
No.
You got look. We replaced 3 new starters. Cesar Ruiz up and coming. Now McCoy the center, but McCoy ain't no Max Unger. And look. So that's why. I mean, look at Jari Evans, Carl Nix. I look at Teron Armstead, Drew. Come on, be honest. We don't have that kind of offensive line.
Here's the thing. You can
make them look better.
You work together. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like you can't be standing back there for 5 seconds and expect them to block that long. You can't. The better you are in the pass game, the more that you can sustain drives, the more you wear down a defense, the more you're able to dent the defense in the run game. Like all these things, they work together. You know.
Yeah, and Drew, and I've said this about like the Drew Brees of the world or the top quarterbacks, that you can make the offensive line better than what they really are just by getting rid of the ball and knowing where to go with the ball. You know what I'm saying? Like, all of a sudden, oh, watch out, you're going to, and the ball's coming out. You might say, well, he took a sack, the quarterback. Well, I look at it, I go, well, he should have got rid of the ball. See, I think at times when you always want to hit that splash play, that chunk play, take what the defense gives you. So also, Derek Carr can help the offensive line be better, even though you don't have across the board like the Jari Evans, Teron Armsteads.
Yeah, look, bottom line is, offensively, you have to be able to control the line of scrimmage, and you do that through being able to run the football. And that doesn't mean that you're getting these huge splash plays. That could just be, just 3 and 4 yards, just dent the defense, use the passing game as an extension of the run game, which was a hallmark of our offense with Sean Payton. Right? I mean, so much of those throws were, it's getting the ball out of our hands. There's nothing more demoralizing for a defensive line than all of a sudden you feel like, I beat my guy. I put together a great move or a counter move, and I'm right on the quarterback, and he gets the ball out of his hands, right? So in my mind, I was thinking to myself, I'm not taking a sack on this drive. I'm getting the ball out of my hands because I want the D-line to recognize that, no matter how good I play or how fast I get to the quarterback, he's going to get the ball out, so it's not making a difference.
And then they're frustrated.
Yeah, then they're frustrated, right? And you can change their mentality. Now, if you want to feed their ego, right, and allow them to get negative plays and allow them to make these kind of game-killing drive plays.
Hold on to the ball.
Yeah, exactly. So, look, I like this Kubiak offense. I mean, I've always loved the Shanahan offense, right? So I think our ability to run the ball with this zone scheme, I think it's going to open up all kinds of throwing lanes. I think these 2 receivers,
Chris Olave,
yes, Olave and Shaheed need to have. I think they need to show as much consistency in the intermediate passing game as their ability to make the big splash plays.
Well, Drew, that was one. But with Derek Carr, I think Derek Carr now being familiar with the team that he's on, he's going to have success. How would you view Derek? Because, it's always like, what have you done for him lately? What are you going to do this season? That I think Derek Carr, I'm not saying he's top 5 or whatever, but Derek Carr is a legitimate starting quarterback, I think.
There's no question. And I've seen Derek Carr operate. Like, this goes back to his early years with the Raiders and with John Gruden. Like, that John Gruden offense is not an easy offense, right? It's basically our offense, but I would argue even wordier. I think Gruden had a tendency to make it super wordy and put a ton on the quarterback. And I would watch those primetime games where everybody's mic'd up, and I would listen to Carr. I would watch him. I know what he's looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, you know enough about these teams now where you know when they get to the ball and it's a check with me situation. And then based on what the defense is doing, here's where I'm going. And, I sensed a confidence. And I sensed that, like, hey, I can read this. I know what I'm doing. I'm getting us into the right play. I've seen that guy play some incredible games and step up in some really, really clutch moments. Here he comes to a new team with new personnel, new environment. And, look, last year, like I said, I think for the whole team was just somewhat inconsistent. But now we come into this year. He's got a year with this team and with this personnel under his belt. He's got a system now that is incorporating, I think, the best of what he's done in the past, incorporated with, I think, the best of what this system brings over from the Niners.
San Fran.
Yeah. Complemented with a great defense that has great leadership and I think is poised to have, another kind of top 10, top 5 type year.
Yeah, so thanks to Ashley O for recording that. I think she did a great job. It's not always easy to get good video and good audio in those settings, so she did a great job. A few things worth noting there, and I do want to give Bobby credit for
calling Drew out right about the offensive line. He's like, "Come on, Drew,"
because that's kind of his like preloaded comment of like, "I played with these guys," and it's like, actually, you haven't. You played with Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz. Other than that,
right.
You have no familiarity in terms of a player with these guys. You've never played with Trevor Penning. You never played with Taliesin Fuanga. You didn't play with Nick Saldiveri or Lucas Patrick. So he does have to, I think he does need to kind of reload that cannon a little bit with some different takes, because you could tell he kind of just went right into it. And then you're like, wait a second. No, he didn't. So I did appreciate Bobby for calling him out on that.
Yeah, because usually, it's like you said, I felt like it was like a preloaded response. And you could even see Bobby's like reaction was like,
yeah,
wait a minute. And he couldn't let it go on. It's like, what are you talking about? This offensive line being, being all right now.
Well, it's funny because he said that last year. He said, like, I remember this exact conversation, right? At the NOLA Pickle Fest. He's like, how do you feel about the offensive line? And he said, I played with these guys. And you were like, oh, yeah, okay. You played with Ryan Ramczyk. You played with Andres Pete, right? Yeah, I think James Hurst was here during Drew Brees' last couple seasons. So, like, yeah, okay. He has played with these guys. Not anymore. It's different now. But so we'll see. One thing that Drew said, and I agree with it, and the term he used was dent the defense. And I don't know if I've ever heard that term, but I think it works. It's a good term to kind of visualize. And we'll have a little bit more from that interview. He's talking about Taysom Hill, a guy who has dented his fair share of defenses. And I think that is what you should look at it. It's about keeping the defense honest. You want to be successful with those runs. You don't want to get run TFLs, right? Like you don't want to get 2 yards a carry, but you do have to commit to it. And that's why, like, we talked to Derek Carr yesterday, and he was asked, what are your favorite things about this offense? And the first thing he said, it took him 2 seconds. He snapped right in. He was like, I love the run game. I love how we use the run game to set up the pass game. And that's so important, right? It's so important that you commit to it. And that's what Pete Carmichael's offense, it just seemed like there was no plan. It was not intentional. And the run game didn't work, or certain elements didn't work, and you just went away from it. And you can't do that, because you need this offense to run the ball, and you need to do that to set up the play action. Because those two elements are what's going to let this offense be successful and let this offensive line survive. So I thought that was a really good point. And you kind of go into it. Obviously, talked about Derek Carr. One thing that's worth noting, Derek Carr, we talk about how he hasn't really been in the playoffs. He did play he started one playoff game. The other Raiders playoff game that he helped them get to, he was hurt for. But you know who called that game? Who was the color commentator for that game?
Drew Brees.
It was Drew. So he does have some understanding of, like, he's watched this guy play in big moments. Now they lost that game to the Bengals. Joe Burrow, that was the Bengals Super Bowl year. Right. So it wasn't like they lost to a nobody team. But no, Drew does, I take Drew's comments seriously. He's not just gassing up Derek Carr to gas up Derek Carr. I think he does believe what he's saying, and we'll see, right? Like Aaron Schatz, who does the Football Almanac, he's Football Outsiders guy. His comments I thought recently were interesting, because he was like, people want to go around and say, like, Derek Carr is this terrible quarterback, and it's like, that's not really what the case. Derek Carr is an average quarterback. He's an aggressively average quarterback, right? And here's the thing: in the NFL, you can be a playoff team with a slightly above replacement level quarterback, and I think that's what Derek is. But you need things to work around him, and that's what happened late in the year last year. Is he was playing a lot closer to what you would say is above his baseline than below his baseline, and the defense was playing well. The receivers were putting up numbers. You were running the ball, and you saw a lot more success. So. Take what Drew says with a grain of salt. I don't think he's ever going to be a kind of an aggressive take guy in terms of, trashing players, right? Like, he's never going to be that guy. But I do believe him when he says, like, that he thinks this offense can have success, because I think this offense can have success. You just got to do it the right way.
Yeah, it's clearly he's never going to throw any offensive lineman under the bus. It's just
even guys that he doesn't know.
Him as a quarterback.
No, I agree with that. So let's get into his next take, which I think is a stronger take. Not necessarily one that should surprise people, but he talked a good bit about Taysom Hill and how he thinks his role should develop. Let's hear that.
One of the things that stays consistent, though, you talked about this offense fitting. Taysom Hill, I think that's a guy. Bob and I've talked about this so often. You got to get the ball in his hands more.
We're not saving him for nothing anymore.
Hey, let's do this little exercise. This will be fun. If we could, if we could go back in time. Obviously, he got here in 2017, and none of us had ever seen anything like it.
Right.
And he played a little bit of everything that year, but it wasn't until 2018 where it's like, man, we can really start to incorporate this guy at quarterback, do a lot of these, QB runs or read
QB
options
power,
yeah, or just let him launch it, right? The guy can launch it.
Yeah.
I don't know why we haven't lived in a world where Taysom Hill is getting 10 to 12 snaps a game at quarterback. This is a little bit of an exercise of.
So you're saying that he should every game get that at least?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Because that puts more pressure on the defense, right? More to have to prepare for.
If you want to go and you want to chart the plays where he's in and he's playing quarterback, and you just chart what the result of the play, and then you match that up with the rest of the plays, I would argue that some of our most successful plays consistently are when Taysom Hill's at quarterback. Now, I'm not sitting here saying, hey, there should be a quarterback controversy.
Right.
Taysom Hill should be the start. But what I'm saying is that there is a tremendous value.
A package, yeah.
When he is playing quarterback. Number one, it's just you can't argue the results. The proof is in the pudding. The results show that that's when we're getting the best yard per play and these other things. And probably big play opportunities. But also for a defense. Think about for a defensive coordinator, the amount of time you have to spend in a week of preparation to get your guys ready for the Taysom Hill package. That's terrifying. That's terrifying. Because if you get into a game and Taysom Hill plays quarterback 7 plays and just wreaks havoc on you for 5 of those, you might get fired.
Yeah, well, he's done that like Bill Belichick, and the Patriots couldn't stop him in the red zone.
And then you was coming.
Yeah, and it's like all of a sudden you call in the wife or the family and said, I'm asleep at the office tonight because they were an extra preparation after Taysom Hill.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm saying when I said, hey, do this exercise and step back in time, there's never been a time in history in NFL that I can think of where you had a guy like that was literally coming in for, call it 10 plus games or plays a game at quarterback and executing that type of offense, or was that type of weapon?
Well, and Drew, I look at him now, they're going to utilize him. I mean, now you get up in age and say, we're not saving Taysom Hill for nothing. We might run him into the ground, whatever, but this season, now we got to take advantage. However many touches he gets, targets, whatever, whether you have him in the slot or whether you have him at quarterback, and just give the defense more to work on, and I'm sure Derek Carr would welcome that.
Yeah.
Because if Derek Carr helps the offense look good, then it helps me look good.
Yeah.
We all in this together.
But I'm saying generally speaking, that's probably the hardest thing for most quarterbacks, because you're sitting here saying, "No, I'm the guy.
I'm the man.
I do not want to leave the field." Right?
Right.
I mean, look, we all feel that way, right?
Yeah.
But then when you all of a sudden look at the results, right, and the fact that you just love the guy.
Yeah.
You love the dude as a teammate, right? But you recognize the value that he brings and everything that he does. And so it's like, you know what? If this is going to help us get in the end zone more, then put him out there as much as you want.
Well, and even look how he helps the team, and he'll do whatever. When, like against Tampa Bay, remember, he blocked the punt. He goes there and he blocks the punt. It's like, that turned the game around and we end up winning. So I'm like, all I know is not less snaps, more snaps. I mean, what are we going to save him for until he's too old? No, it sounds terrible, run him into the ground, but it's like, no, Taysom, you're playing a lot.
Think about in the last 50 years. Can you name another guy that did or has done what Taysom Hill has? He's in a special category in the NFL.
Well, it's what makes it so difficult for defense is when Taysom Hill runs off of the sideline to go into the huddle, you don't know what position he's playing, right?
Right.
Like you're trying to decipher what the package is based on the other personnel, but you don't know if Taysom's going in to play quarterback, to play running back, to play tight end, to play slot receiver. Like you really don't know where he's going to line up. And based on lined up, you have to be like instantaneous with what the adjustment that you might be making as a defense, or else you're out of position. And so that's the part that's a headache for a D coordinator, is you can dream up all this, the perfect defense, but if your guys can't communicate it well enough to be in position once they're out there and once the huddle breaks, and we prided ourselves on being very fast tempo, hey, get everybody lined up. Boom, we're getting the ball snapped. If we catch you out of position, man, that just works to our advantage. So no, there's nobody that's ever been like him in the NFL in history.
So
Hot take by Drew.
Yeah, I don't know how hot it is. We know he loves Taysom Hill. It's funny
Right.
you talk about, okay, hey, do quarterbacks like coming off the field? Absolutely not. You think Drew wanted to come off the field in 2017? No, but when he says what he's saying there, I believe him, because that doesn't happen. Taysom Hill doesn't become the player that he is. Doesn't get the role that he has unless Drew is willing to let it happen. If Drew went out there and be like, I'm not coming off the field, you think Taysom is getting QB reps? No. And like Sean's like, fine, we'll figure it out. But Drew always appreciated the value that Taysom brought. And what he's saying there is spot on. Like, what I want for Taysom Hill, he's saying 12 QB reps. I think that's a little overkill.
Seems it, right.
I think, to me, it's more like, I want the defense to have to be prepared for 12 Taysom Hill QB reps. I want 12 reps throughout a game where the defense is over there scrambling, like, oh, is he going to play? Is he quarterback? And then you run out there with the personnel that he could play quarterback, but he's not. He splits outside. And then another time he goes out there, he could be quarterback, and he is. Or you run out there in a Wildcat set with him and Kamara, and he hands the ball to Kamara. Like, I don't need Taysom to get the ball snapped to him 12 times. I don't need him to run the ball 12 times. I want the defense to have to account for it 12 times. Because when you do that, it requires them to get out of their comfort zone and to do things they might not be ready for, right? Like, one of the values that Taysom Hill has, even when he's not getting the ball, is the other team has to sit there. You don't get that much prep time throughout the week. There's not that much time, especially on a short week. Think about a 4-day week where you're trying to come up with a game plan. How much time are you devoting in practice to Taysom Hill to stopping that specific set? Because you'd better be spending some time. And I want to test whether you did that or not. I want to test whether you did it correctly or not. And if you didn't, I'm going to hammer you over the head with it until you can stop it. Because like Drew said, it's like, if Taysom Hill goes out there for 7 reps and he's going for ripping off 20-yard runs on 5 of them, you might get fired. Like, that's the type of value that he has. And if you don't think defensive coordinators are sitting up being like, shit, we got to deal with this, and they are. But that's only the case if you force them to account for it. So I want to test that. I want to test that early. I want to see how they react to it. And then I'm going to make all of my decisions based off how they're reacting to it. We've seen a couple Taysom Hill QB sets, and both times in the training camp so far, it's been Derek Carr splitting out wide. And, I talked to Deuce about this, and it was like, okay, why would you do that? Are they going to respect Derek running outside? Occasionally you may have to try to get him the ball or run a set where he's involved. But like, if I can get Taysom running against the nickel defense, I don't need that extra blocker. I want to see him go head up with a safety and see if that safety can take him down. And that's what I just haven't seen enough of. Like, I don't think it all has to be take Derek off the field. Like, I don't think you want to take Derek off the field 12 times is my point. But I do think that there's a level that you can match where even if Derek's on the field, the defense has to be concerned about it. He's in that personnel, and we have to match it. Because if they have to go out there, if they go out there in base and you have 3 linebackers, yeah, you throw it. You line them up in the slot, and you match up Alvin Kamara on the Sam linebacker, right? Or you find a matchup that you can exploit with that extra linebacker out there. That's what Taysom Hill allows, right? He allows you to dictate what they're going to do as opposed to the other way around. And so that's why I agree with Drew. I think you want to be dictating their personnel by Taysom Hill being in your personnel at least 12 times a game is how I would phrase that.
It just, like, what stuck out to me was the 12 snaps at quarterback, just because we've seen the Taysom experience at QB, and a lot of mixed reviews from it. Hasn't been all that great, but according to Drew, the numbers dictate differently.
Well, I mean, we've talked about it, right? Like the win-loss total when Taysom gets 7+ carries or whatever that number is. It's not a coincidence. Now, it's not just as simple as saying, well, if we give him the ball 7 times, we'll win. Why don't we just stop the game now? He got a 7th carry. Good game. Move on. No, that's not what it is. But, I do think that it's going to be interesting because, the funny thing with Pete Carmichael is Taysom probably got his most usage with Pete compared to what he got with Sean.
Right.
Now, was it creative? No. Was it always effective? No. But he's averaged 5.5 yards a carry the last 2 years, even with that very bland milquetoast kind of approach. 11 rushing touchdowns, right? Then he can throw the ball if they're not respecting it. He can throw it. If if they're going to load up on him because they don't think he's going to give it, he's going to hand it to Alvin Kamara. So it's going to be interesting to see how Clint does that. Is he going to line up at fullback more often? What is and I think a lot of it's going to be, okay, what is the personnel you're getting, right? Like if I'm running 11 out there and I have Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara and 3 wide receivers and they're giving me base, that's a win for me because I'm throwing it, right? I don't need Taysom to throw it, but I'm throwing it. If I run 11 out there and they give me a nickel or dime look because they think, well, we have 5 pass catches on the field, then I am having Taysom. I'm splitting Derek outside and I'm having Taysom go take the snap. And I think that's the kind of trigger you need to be able to pull, is to adjust in real time when you see what they're doing. And so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Drew's always going to be a Taysom guy. There's no question there.
Yeah, I mean, I know he's, dealing with family stuff now, more involved with that, but it seems like Drew Brees as a coach in some aspect is on the horizon.
No.
You don't think in the later years?
I don't see it. I don't see it because he think he's just a busy guy, right? I don't think he wants to get into coaching. I think he wants to get back into broadcasting. I think that's going to be where we see Drew try to get back into the analyst chair, and what he needs to do is be a little more critical of players. I think that's where you get into trouble I know that's where you get into trouble, is you got to be able to call people out, and that's where I think he tried to. It's really hard to be an analyst if you're not willing to call people out when they're playing poorly, like not necessarily playing badly, not struggling, effort wise, right? Like one of the most telling things, like this is a different sport, but I remember watching a Pelicans game and Reggie Miller is out there talking about Eric Bledsoe. If you're a Pelicans fan, you understand this. Eric Bledsoe's not playing defense. He's not giving effort, right? And it's like, these guys know these players. Like it takes a bit of, bit of balls or whatever term you want to use to call out a guy who has your phone number, and can call you up and be like, what the fuck, man? Yeah. And that's where I just don't know if Drew's ever going to get to, but I do respect his opinion on the Saints offense, that I always will.
I just think he loves ball so much that eventually when the kiddos are a lot older, maybe in college or maybe after college, and they're on with their lives, he might dip his heel into like the QB coaching, and who knows where that gets to.
Yeah, I would love to see him be a quarterback's coach at some point and go from there. But the investment there, yeah, it would probably have to be after his kids get into college and graduate college, and at that point you're talking about
married,
talking about a guy who's 10 years removed from playing. That's tough. But we've seen Jari Evans took some time off and then got into coaching, so it does happen.
Yeah, there you go.
But all right, let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to hit a quick look ahead. What are we watching for? What players should you be on the lookout for in the preseason game? We're going to do all that. This is Inside Black and Gold. Thanks for everyone for hanging out. We got a lot of people in here. Good lunchtime podcast. Maybe we do this again because it does seem like this is maybe a good time for people to kind of tune in and hit people. We're definitely getting a lot more traction with this one than we did with our 10 p.m. Central Time live stream. Although we did get some guys hanging out.
I was going to say maybe a Friday midday is a lot more popular too. Everyone's kind of ready for the weekend and chilling already.
Yeah, we'll see. But I appreciate everyone who's in here. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, please do that. Hit me up on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. If you're out in California, hit me up. We'll be out here for another week. Maybe we can meet up. Steve Geller over there at Steve Geller WWL. If you're, he's in New Orleans. So if you want to hang out in air conditioning, you can do that too. But all right, this is Inside Black and Gold. We will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak, Steve Geller coming at you. I'm in Irvine. He's in Louisiana. We're getting ready for the Saints preseason opener in Arizona. I'll be flying out there this afternoon. Never been to that stadium. I know you have. I'm looking forward to it. This is one of the perks of this job is I get to go visit stadiums that I've seen on TV a bunch of times. And, it's not always new, right? Like the division matchups kind of get boring after a while. Like, you've been to Carolina, you've been to Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte one time. You don't need to go back, but I do have to go back.
Sadly, my one time in the Arizona Stadium was the famous now GIF with Andy Dalton's interception and the guy in the background jumping.
That was a Thursday night. Yeah, that was Marco Wilson. That's actually the same guy who threw the shoe in the LSU game.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah. So he's been he's been a main character in several great maybe not so great Louisiana sporting moments, but we'll continue. That's going to happen. And then we'll have joint practice with the 49ers. Bobby Aber is going to be out here next week. So I'm sure we'll have him, a lot of good clips from him to share. And then obviously that game with the 49ers, then finally heading back home to New Orleans. And it's all these days have run together. This 3 weeks in a hotel room have been a thing.
And now you're going to be in a new hotel room.
Yes. Well, I'll be in a new hotel room tonight and tomorrow, and then I'll be back to this hotel room, and then we'll go to a different hotel room, and then go back to my house, hang out with my dog. But let's get into it. We're going to talk about stuff to watch, players to watch for the preseason game. Now, the question's going to be, okay, is the first team offensive line, the quarterback out there? And if so, kind of that communication is what I'm going to watch. I don't need, success, failure, whether that drive ends in the end zone. People will freak out if it doesn't, but we've seen from experience that a perfect drive that gets into the end zone is not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen in the regular season. So I don't know the results of it, whatever. I'm sure people will freak out if it's a 3-and-out.
But you definitely don't want that.
Yeah. But I want to see them get in and out of the huddle. I want to see it seem like, I want to see guys look like they understand the plan. I want to see, I don't want to see procedural penalties, stuff like that. So that's going to be the main thing. But that's only going to be one series at most, I would imagine. So from there, we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the backup quarterback battle. Who gets in the game first between Jake Haener and Spencer Rattler? I think both have been coming on really strong at camp. Right on Thursday, I had literally written down play of the day. And it was Spencer Rattler who, in his 2-minute set, he did a 48 seconds, one timeout, got to get in the end zone. On that drive, he threw a ball to hit A.T. Perry in the hands, dropped it. Next play, so this is second down. Landon Young holding penalty on what would have been a screen. So now you're 2nd and 20. You're set back. Next play goes right back to A.T. Perry, picks up the penalty yardage, first down, out of bounds, got time. Play after that, rolls out, bootleg, Kevin Austin in the end zone for a touchdown, hits Kevin Austin again for a 2-point conversion. I was like, play of the day. Then you go out, Jake Haener. He's running a different situational set. And it's because the third team offense is going to be the one on the field at the end of the game. So they wanted to kind of get that 2-minute scenario under their belt. And so he goes down the field, it's a pretty successful drive, 3 plays. And he rolls out, throws, I think it's 28 yards. Samson Nakua goes up one hand over Shamar John Charles, just brings it down. Great throw, great catch. Jake Haener's out there cursing in front of all the kids that are out there with the family members. He got fired up. If you don't think Jake Haener gets fired up because he's kind of ho-hum guy, he does. And so then I cross out the Spencer Rattler play and be like, well, that was the play of the day, right? But no, both these guys I think have been coming on really strong. Jake's been firing the ball and he's dealt with the skin cancer. That should be a thing. He's still got the Band-Aid. You'll probably see the Band-Aid on the broadcast. But no, it's gonna be fascinating to see how those guys handle those situations. I would guess that we see Jake first, mainly because he's number 2 on the depth chart. And I think that's kind of what you're saying there is you're going to get Jake first. It's just going to be a question of whether he starts or comes off the bench behind Derek Carr first. And then how you split up that rest of the game. Do you give Jake the entire second quarter and then put Spencer in for the second half? Do you mix it up a little bit differently? But either way, that's going to be what determines this quarterback competition, in my opinion. I don't think either guy has separated themselves in the training camp practices to a point where you're like, oh, it's definitely this guy. But I will say, more so than Jake, I think Spencer, throughout this camp process, had a much bigger risk factor of if he plays a certain way, he can play himself out of this conversation. If he plays like a rookie and, he doesn't look like he's comfortable in these 2-minute scenarios, which he very much has looked comfortable in those 2-minute scenarios, then I think there was a scenario you got to this game and you're like, okay, Jake's the guy and we're going to keep developing Spencer in the background. I think Spencer has played more than well enough to be fully into that conversation.
It's really strange because I feel like, both of these young quarterbacks on the roster, when they speak, I really am buying into what both of them are saying. They're very confident. It comes across like they sound and look like they're ready to be leaders of a team. And yeah, obviously very curious to see how this shakes out. You would think Haener's got that little bit of a leg up since he's been here since, last year. And that's why I would definitely give him the reps, the starting reps, at least in this game. But we've talked about it before too. That was also a different regime. And this new, kind of Kubiak in his system, they drafted Spencer Rattler. So it's going to be curious. I'm curious to see what exactly happens there. I don't know what to expect though. If we see Derek Carr for this preseason game 1, I feel like you have to see him though in and some of these games.
Yeah, and for Jake, I think the leg up is he's played in this type of environment before, right? Like
Right,
he
exactly.
got a lot of action last year's preseason. The first 2 games went well. The last game didn't go well. So he's kind of experienced it on both ends. He's kind of seen like, hey, this is what happens when I'm doing well. This is what happens when I'm trying to spam the X button to Lucas Krull and they kind of read it and get a couple interceptions. So we'll see. And I think that's kind of where you're going to look at it. And this is what Dennis Allen had to say when he was asked about like, what are you looking for in that quarterback competition on Saturday?
I think both of those guys going out and proving that they can operate the offense, get the play call, get in and out of the huddle, get to the line of scrimmage, get the snap off, go through our progressions. All those are the things that you're really looking for. What kind of poise do these guys play with? When the lights are on and the crowd's going, do they go to playing playground football, or do they play with poise and composure and operate the offense the way that it was intended to be operated? That doesn't mean that there won't be some off-script plays. I want to see how, when things don't go exactly right, how do we respond? And so, I think I'm looking for how they operate the offense, and I'm looking for how do they respond when things don't go exactly the way we drew it up.
Yeah, and I think that's an important part of this, right? Like in camp, it's really difficult to assess anything beyond success, failure on that particular play, right? Like we don't know what the read was supposed to be. You can't go back and look and see like, well, he went through his progression a little too fast. He didn't wait for this to open up, blah, 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 right? So, I think that's always going to be something that like, we could talk about these highlight plays. But it can't always be like DA put it, like kind of playground football. Like there's a way you're supposed to run the offense, and we might not know whether that's happening or not. But I guarantee you, behind the scenes, they're looking at this tape and they're saying, "Hey, this was supposed to be here, and you did this, right? Like the ball was supposed to come out at this point, and you were a second late, right? Like I have heard Clint Kubiak kind of reaming out Spencer. It was on the day that Jake wasn't there. And I think that like it was kind of along the lines of like, MF, or if there was another quarterback out here, I'd pull you. Because he's like, you need to do this. And that's not to say like, oh, he's gonna bench him. It's just kind of like that's the type of thing that you might lose if you're only looking at, oh yeah, he led a successful 2-minute drive. He did this, right? Now you need some of that, right? You need some off-schedule playmaking. And I think that's where we've seen Spencer really thrive on some off-schedule plays. But that's not necessarily what's going to win you a backup job, because you need someone who's going to go in there and run the offense. So I just say all that to understand, like, hey, even if a guy goes out there and makes some really spectacular plays, that's not the only thing you're looking for in the preseason. Now, in a game, you're going to go out and win. Like, you're not going to be like, well, he looked really good and we won a game, but I wanted him to throw to this guy, and instead he found this guy. Like, we're talking about Joe Milton right now for the Patriots, right? Like, he's just making all these crazy off-schedule plays, and that's great. There's value there. It's not the only thing you're looking for. And so when you're looking at the quarterback competition, understand that there's going to be some nuance behind it that's a little more than just what was the completion percentage, how many yards did he put up, did he get the ball in the end zone. It's going to be, did he run the offense correctly? And so that's something that both Jake and Spencer are going to have to figure out.
I want to ask you something a little off track here. You mentioned the name earlier, and I'm just curious your thoughts on wide receiver Samson Nacua so far, because I feel like there's been a few, video leaks from, training camp practices when you guys are able to shoot that he's looked pretty impressive.
Yeah, I had a ESPN affiliate up in Utah contact me like, well, I want to talk about Samson Nacua.
Okay.
I do appreciate, hey, we all know how to say his name, so you got to give Puka credit, because otherwise we'd be like, Nakwa? What's his name? Like, we would not be talking about Samson Nacua in the way that we are if there was not the quick connection to Puka. Right? So let's just be honest about that. That said, if you just erase the name on the back of his jersey, he's made some really impressive plays. And he's a bigger guy. He doesn't have quite the build of Puka. Right, like Puka's like built like a running back. Like I talked to Ike Adam about it last year. Like, what makes him so difficult to cover? It's like he's just so strong. Like you can't body him up. You can't redirect him. He redirects you, and that's what makes him unique in that way. And he's also very athletic. He can go get the ball. Sampson's a little slighter of build, but you can see like the strength is there. He kind of reminds me a little of Equinemius St. Brown, a guy who's been hurt. They have similar skill sets, right? I do think that like kind of his ball skills might be a little better than EQ, and we haven't seen EQ because he's been hurt. So yeah, no, and he's one of my players to watch, right? You're going to talk about these kind of depth wide receivers.
Yeah,
I think that Sampson is going to turn himself into someone who's very difficult to cut, and I think we talked. Going into camp, like prior to camp, who's going to be that wide receiver who goes out there and makes some like eye-popping catches in the preseason, and becomes like that hype train player. And initially, I thought it was going to be Kyle Sheets because that's kind of Kyle Sheets' game, is mossing people and going up. He got cut, and I always kind of said like I don't think Kyle Sheets is going to make the roster, but I think he's got an opportunity to like have some people being, well, why did he get cut? I saw him make all these plays. I think that's going to be Samson Nacua. I think we're going to be talking on Monday about how, he's really kind of emerging. And then everyone's going to pay attention nationally because, have you heard Samson Nacua? He's Puka's brother, right? So,
of course, right.
We'll see. But that said, one of the things that he does is that it's important. He blocks, and he can block, and he's a willing blocker. And the first thing when Dennis Allen was asked about Samson, he said he's done some things in a blocking game that caught my attention. And in order for you to make this roster as a depth wide receiver, you got to do two things. You got to contribute on special teams, and you got to block. Because the kind of negative about this wide receiver core in terms of the top end is you got Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, neither of whom I would qualify as a plus blocker. Now, they're going to have to be willing blockers. It's going to be important in terms of this offense having success. But I do think you need kind of that third guy or fourth guy who you can throw on the field and feel like, hey, we can do multiple things with him. Now, Cedric Wilson's probably the wide receiver 3 right now. And so you're talking about a guy like A.T. Perry or Samson Nacua. I think they're similar. They're both bigger. They can both go up and get a ball. So we'll see. But that's kind of when I look at talk about things I'm looking for, it's that depth wide receiver battle. And can one of these guys emerge and be a playmaker? And I think Samson's going to make himself into someone who's tough to cut.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, a huge interest, just a name alone. And like I said, it would seem like some of those clips coming out from California, a lot of early good returns, at least on what he was doing out there.
He's been making plays, and obviously Mason Tipton hasn't been out there the last couple of days.
Yeah,
and I highly doubt that he'll be out there on Saturday. So it's going to be an opportunity for him. So we'll see it. A couple other guys, one offensive lineman that has really kind of emerged as a UDFA, and this was my prediction, is that this would be the guy who pushes to either make the roster as like a priority practice squad guy. Kyle Hergel, guard out of Boston College. He's a Canadian guy, so this will actually be his first NFL game that he attends in person. And he kind of joked, "It's like, I have good seats."
I used that clip this morning in one of my sports wraps because it's pretty amusing that he hasn't even attended an NFL game.
Yeah, no, he was drafted into the CFL, so he's got a fallback option if this doesn't work out. But we've seen him get first team reps, on that day that the defense got like 14 sacks, right? So take that with a grain of salt. He did get first team reps, but it's telling that they had him in that rotation at all, right? Like he was taking reps next to you were rotating Oli Udoh, Landon Young, and Kyle Hergel, right? And they have a bunch of options that they could have thrown in there in terms of UDFAs. He's clearly at the top of that list. So I'm interested to see if he can continue to kind of cement that status. Derek Carr jokes with him that he reminds him of Richie Incognito, right? He's been calling him Richie. Derek has been saying like, "Hey, Richie," like that's his nickname for him. And that's not a terrible thing, right? Like the quarterback, because Richie Incognito was a really good player in the NFL for a long time. Is he still in the NFL? I'm not even sure.
I don't think so. No.
But like that's not a terrible thing to have the starting quarterback giving you a nickname of a player that he respects, So
what I loved about Hergel when the Saints, he's one of the, UDFAs, like you mentioned, the team giving us a bunch of guys to talk to on air. And I thought Hergel, man, just hearing his presence,
he's smart.
His football IQ just seems really high, very coachable dude.
I agree with that completely. A couple other quick ones. We went a little longer on some of those than I anticipated, but linebackers. So linebackers and defensive backs.
So long?
Yeah. What's that like? So you're not seeing either starting linebacker out there in terms of Pete Werner or Demario Davis. They're both messing with injuries. You're not seeing either starting cornerback in Marshawn Lattimore or Paulson Adebo. They're missing with injuries. So you're going to have some depth options, right? They're probably going to see a good bit of Kool-Aid. He's been second team on the outside. So I don't expect him to start. I expect you're going to see Shamar John Charles and Race John Wright on the other side, and then Kool-Aid's going to work in. But we'll see. right? One of those guys, I want to see him make some plays. It's going to be a tough roster to crack at the cornerback position, but can you kind of turn yourself into a difficult cut or a practice squad guy? That's a question. Anthony Orji and DeMarco Jackson, Monty Rice, even, they're going to have an opportunity to show that, hey, this is a guy you want to keep around as kind of the future of your linebacker room. We'll see. The kicker competition. Who gets the reps, right? I would expect that Charlie Smith might get them in this game, and maybe you don't dress Blake Grupe because I think you want to start to get him some game atmosphere kicks. He's never done it. So, you want to see, fans in the stands, people yelling at you, some pressure, obviously not real game pressure in terms of the standings, but I want to see him out there and I want to see him getting opportunities. And then, so I doubt you'll switch off in game with those two kickers, at least not in this first one. But I want to see whoever's out there, I want to see him do it well. Dallin Hulker, Michael Jacobson, a couple young tight ends who are trying to make this roster. Both have made plays, particularly Michael Jacobson with Spencer Rattler in the receiving game. But can they block? These are questions, and you're going to have, it's going to be something you have to go back on the tape on and really assess. But that's going to be another interesting competition for me. And then defensive tackle, Christian Boyd is a guy I'm looking forward to stand out. He's had a strong camp, so I want to see him make some plays Saturday.
Yeah, and obviously we mentioned the QBs. Another one for me that's big, the Trevor Penning. I know all eyes are going to be on him, obviously, wondering what's going to happen. And I think, too, obviously, I don't know if he's going to play at all, get a few snaps, but, man, with all the reviews that have been coming from Saints training camp, a lot of Houdat's are anxious to see Chase Young in action, obviously.
Yeah, I don't expect to see Chase Young out there, right?
Okay.
And that's why, I'm talking about the stuff I want to watch. I'm kind of keeping it to the guys I know are going to play. Even if Trevor Penning's out there, I expect it'll be limited. It'll be one series. I don't want to take too much out of that in terms of like, oh, he got beat here, he got beat there. I want to see him start to settle in. So I'm not going to go in saying keep a close eye on Trevor Penning because we just don't know what he's going to be looking for. But one other thing I'll talk about, and then we'll close out here. I'm just trying to flash up some comments. We got a lot of people in here talking. I will not tolerate any Deuce McAllister slander on this podcast. Io Toto talking trash. Anyway, but the kickoffs. It's going to be the first chance we get to see the Saints and how the Saints handle the kickoffs. And that's the interesting thing is I think you're going to have 32 teams out there, and you're going to have 32 different special teams coaches kind of instilling 32 kind of slightly different approaches to how you want to handle not only return, but coverage and blocking. And do you take 2 steps back and block? Do you how do you kind of handle that? Do you give ground? Do you attack? How do you handle the receiver part of the equation with the 2 guys? We won't see Rashid out there. So it's going to be a question of how do you do it? We saw a few tandems that I'll note in the final practice. First time we've really seen the full team drill. And so what I've noticed is you end up with kind of a return ace type player, one of those guys back, and then you end up with a plus blocker in that group. So you had Kool-Aid McKinstry and Jamal Williams was one tandem. You had James Robinson and Jordan Mims was another tandem. I don't think that one's necessarily going to have legs, but we'll go from there. And then, but the one that's intriguing to me is you had Taysom Hill and Alontae Taylor.
Yeah.
And I think people sleep on Alontae's athleticism. One of the things he was talking to Chris Olave, they were kind of talking back and forth during these drills. And one of the things that Alontae said, he's like, I got to learn how to take a hit again. It's like, I haven't been hit since high school. It's like, I've been the guy hitting people. I got to learn how to get hit. So that's kind of interesting. But the other thing when you're watching it, keep in mind, so the way the Saints are running it, it's the guy on the right who has the call. So you watch a baseball game, the center fielder, like, I got it, right? Like he's running in, like he's the guy who gets to decide. It's the guy on the right who gets to say, and it's kind of like a Night at the Roxbury thing. Like they yell like, me, you, me. And so you might hear that on the broadcast. If you hear, if they catch it and you hear like, me, that's the guy on the right who is making that call. The guy on the left only gets the ball if the guy on the right decides, I can't get to it, and it's your ball, right? So he's going to be yelling you or me. And the other guy who isn't getting the ball, his job is to run upfield and block. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of do that. We've seen some reverse return where the guy loops around and kind of toss it to him. We've seen a couple times Taysom has thrown the ball across the field. We have also seen a few too many of these kickoffs hit the ground. So That creativity is fun until it turns into a turnover, and then all of a sudden it's like, what the hell are you thinking?
I know critics were brutal after that Hall of Fame game, and it's like, all right, hold on though. That was just one game. Let's see how this thing really shakes out.
I think teams are learning, and one thing that I think teams are going to have a hard time with is not necessarily the return part of it. It's how do you block, right? Because that's just a part of the game that they haven't done. Like the guys running downfield, you obviously get a later start than you had previously, but otherwise it's kind of the same. You're just trying to beat a block. The guys who have to sit there and then get off the ball, they can't even see the ball behind them really. Like they're going based off of the coverage team, right? And so, who gets off fastest, who gets beat, who whiffs, like that part of the game is going to be important. And I think in the Hall of Fame game, what you saw was the blocking isn't good. And that's going to be a part, like that's going to be kind of a differentiator of which teams can actually take advantage of this and which teams actually lose yardage because of this. Because if I'm going against a team and they demonstrate that they like, if I'm a team that likes to kick it out of the back of the end zone because I don't want to risk it, and then I watch, a couple games go by and whatever team it is sucks at that part of it. It can't block, just cannot get it sorted out. That's going to be the team that I force to return it, So I think that's going to be a factor is which of these teams can block the best. And then you might have some teams that are a lot better at coverage than others, and you want to take advantage of that. So we'll see, but it's definitely going to be a major wrinkle that in a part of the game that we just have not talked about for several years. And now suddenly we're back into it again. So that'll be fun, and it'll give you something to watch in the fourth quarter of a preseason game that otherwise you would have tuned out of.
Saints special teams units have been pretty, high up there. So hopefully they can maintain that. I know we've talked about it too a ton that, Darren Rizzi was one of the guys behind, getting these rules changed to this. So hopefully the Saints can be at the forefront of the elite in the NFL.
Yeah, like I think the Saints are a team that sees special teams as value-added scenarios.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see them continue to try to make that happen. So we'll see. But that's all I got. Mario wants to point out that I have a nice tan going on. I do. But I'm going to stay inside all day today, other than being on an airplane, which I guess that's still technically inside. You're just elevated.
Yeah, you'll be mostly confined.
Yes, I'm not.
How long is it? Like a hop, skip, and a jump over to what, Santa Clara?
Well, it's not Santa Clara. Wait, we're going to Arizona today.
Oh,
so
I'm thinking San Francisco already, right?
Yeah, Phoenix, which it sounds like a really short flight until you take a flight from John Wayne in Santa Ana to San Jose. It's like it's like a flight that you don't even get the cruising altitude. Like you're going up and then going down. You could probably see the planes. This is the first time I've had the window open because I figured out how the lighting works. You could probably see the planes going behind me. Like that's how close we are to the airport. Is like you can see the planes taking off and landing from my window. But yeah, so it's not going to be a long commute to the airport. I think it'll be a 4-minute Uber ride, but
nice and easy peasy. Hopefully, everything's smooth and the post-game podcast, we're at least glowing about something. And I know that there's going to be a lot of ugly football going on, but some of these guys that we're anxious to see in action, obviously the quarterbacks, to me, is definitely at the forefront right now in this game.
No question. But that's going to wrap it up for us. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out for this #LunchPod. I guess I'll drop this tan comment because we didn't keep that, but I appreciate pointing it out because, it's balanced, right? It's balanced. Anyway.
Yeah, the wife's probably like, screw you for being able to even hang out outside.
She's just mad that she has to walk the dog every day. That's really like every time I call,
right.
It's like, what are you doing? I'm walking the dog again. It's a thing. I miss my dog. I have 3 cats and a dog, and then they all think I'm dead.
Wait till you come back. All the love you're going to get from puppers.
Yeah, resurrection. Or it's funny. Then this is an aside, but it's a quick one. So when I was first moving down here, right, it's a different dog. My dog passed away last year, but or my former dog passed away last year. My current dog is alive, but
you're right. Pet Cemetery.
When I came down here for really positive vibes, when I came down to New Orleans initially, so I moved down for 3 months, and my now wife stayed up there with everything, and then I went back and we moved down. But so you see those videos of like dogs greeting their someone who was deployed and they come back and it's like, oh my God. And those videos are really cute and fun because they're so excited. So Zuma was his name, and he was a very passive aggressive animal. And So, I'm gone for 3 months. I come back, and so I'm standing out in the driveway, and Claire opens the door and lets the dog out, and we're like, oh, I wonder what he's gonna do. The dog walks 3 steps out into the driveway and just like stands there and barks at me, like aggressively barks. Now, keep in mind, this dog loves me. This is my dog. Claire moved in. I already had the dog. Anyway, the dog was like, and it's like angry. It's like, how dare you? I mourned you. Like, how dare you show your face around here again?
Right. Hey, asshole, I thought you were gone forever. How
you know how many
me?
nights I sat here staring at the door and you just show your face? Anyway, he got over it. But it was the most dramatic reunion meeting I've ever seen with a dog. It was like he was genuinely just like mad at me for being gone. I don't think that's what's going to happen because the dog I have currently does not have that depth, not a lot going on behind the eyes.
Also a female too, right?
Yes.
So a little bit of temperament difference.
Bailey the dog. Anyway, she's made appearances on this podcast. But all right, I didn't intend to tell that story, but now you have it. So we'll see if the dog actually likes me when I get home. We'll find out. But all right, who dat? This is Inside Black and Gold. Thanks everyone for hanging out. If you haven't subscribed yet, if you made it all the way to the end of this podcast and haven't hit the subscribe button, I don't know. I'm worried about you. But anyway, thanks everyone for hanging out. Thanks Steve for spending the time. I know you gotta start getting going on your actual job. And I'm gonna get ready to head out to
our job.
Yeah, that's true. I'm gonna get ready to
Saturday 3:00 first take, 5:00 countdown to kickoff, and of course game time 7 p.m. WWL radio. Boom!
I throw a spoon around. Yes, and I'll be on the sideline. I'm excited about it. It's gonna be like a real football game again.
Right, no more practice.
Talking about practice. Anyway, all right. Who dat? Go Saints.
Hey everyone.
Peace.